watching The Connie Bryan Show. Let's start off because I always like to begin the program welcoming all of our viewers in our respective markets across the nation. So first of all, we want to welcome, of course, our Sacramento and our Davis viewers where we emanate from. Davis is right next door to Sacramento, so welcome to all of you. Also, we want to welcome all of our viewers from the Truckee, Tahoe area. Thank you for tuning into the show. And then moving a little over closer toward the Bay Area, we want to welcome our Napa Valley viewers. Thank you for watching. Also, our Berkeley viewers, thank you for tuning in. And over to the Bay Area, we of course want to welcome all of our San Francisco viewers. Thank you so much for watching. And down in Southern California, we want to, of course, welcome our Pasadena viewers, our Long Beach viewers, and our Santa Cruz viewers. Thank you for tuning into the show, as always. Outside of California, we have 5 markets. So, like I did last show, let's start from the East Coast this time with Salem. Thank you so much, Salem, Massachusetts, for tuning into the program. We broadcast in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, so we want to welcome all of you. Thank you for tuning in. Also, our Minneapolis, Minnesota viewers, thank you so much, as always, for watching the program. And our Denver, Colorado viewers, thank you so much for tuning into the show. And last but not least, we want to welcome our Portland, Oregon viewers. Thank you so much for watching. And all of you watching wherever you are, worldwide on the web, thank you for tuning in. This is a very special episode. I'm going to get right to it because I know we're going to run out of time so quickly. But I'm going to be making the show, if it's possible, because you guys know I always try to be real for you. Because you don't get that in the news. Ever since I started in talk radio back in Florida years ago in the mid-90s, where I was taking phone calls and stirring it up with a midday talk show about hot topics in the news, and that's pretty much a dead thing. It's becoming a dead thing now that all the conglomerates have bought up all the independent radio stations. They don't want people's voices heard. They control who gets access to the airwaves, and that's a threat. They don't want the people's voices readily heard in communities. So back when I started in talk radio, that was my priority. And then I've continued that with the Connie Bryan Show on television and cable access because the media, the news media, is a joke. It doesn't report the news. It creates something that it thinks will entertain you, and it controls what you see and leaves out often the most important stuff. And the most important stuff is what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to be showing you a lot of clips that you won't see in the mainstream media. Let's start with the Eisenhower Military-Industrial Complex clip. Now, I know a lot of you have seen this, but believe it or not, every time this clip is shown, there's a lot of young people who haven't seen this. So we're going to go ahead and roll that to get started here.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Unfortunately, it's too late to guard against that threat that President Eisenhower, as he was leaving office, was warning us about. Our government has been compromised by this threat for some time now. There's an elite, uber-wealthy power, elite beyond even what is often referred to as the 1%. I'm talking even more of a smaller percentile. And it has strong tentacles in a dangerous hybrid of areas, including not just the military-industrial complex. It's deeply into that, but not just that. Related monopolizing corporations also. Deep tentacles in our national intelligence departments. They have an empire-building, control the world agenda at all costs, and they see you and I as nothing but commodities and sheep to be pacified, used, and exploited in their agenda. Now, I want to share with you John F. Kennedy's clip where he talks about this too.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
What you need to understand, folks, is this. This deep state, or whatever you want to call it, that word is thrown around so much anymore, this power-hungry kind of secretive effort that's controlling and pulling the strings of our government now, they're willing to do anything to accomplish their empire-building world agenda, including using levels of violence that would be beyond our comprehension, with any and all loss of human life by us being seen as necessary collateral damage in the interest of their idea for the world and their profit motives. Let's don't forget that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I never have been, but that doesn't mean that there aren't conspiracies out there and that we need to guard against it and not be afraid to talk about it because we might be branded a conspiracy theorist. More and more patriotic Americans are beginning to be willing to do that, beginning to wake up and realize, as we try to figure out how to take our country back from the anti-American, anti-democratic, anti-constitutional, monopolizing corporatism that has replaced the democratic capitalism that our forefathers intended. And this corporatism has corrupted our country's leadership and values. Just like I showed you a few minutes ago, JFK warned us about this, just like Eisenhower did. He was very vocal about standing up to it. He referred to it as a secret society, shadow government that had a secret agenda that it wanted to keep from Americans in general. That was JFK saying that, not just Connie. It wasn't long after JFK spoke of his commitment to stand up to those with such an agenda that he was assassinated. And just like the events of 9/11, because that's where we're going tonight, there was a huge organized lie, a huge organized government lie that was sold to the American people about JFK's assassination as well. Take a look at this clip now. I'm going to try to move quickly to get as many of these clips in as I can. Take a look at this clip now from Bill Moyers' Deep State, Hiding in Plain Sight. And listen to how author Mike Lofgren describes it.
Say that that you came to question this? It took you a while. It was a gradual enlightenment that took place. You were dealing with big numbers and particular details in the budgets that all of these agencies were sending to you when you were on Capitol Hill, right? You were seeing the numbers.
Absolutely.
And what was happening to the numbers?
At the end of 2001 is we appropriated a lot of money, and it didn't seem to be going to Afghanistan, the proximate source of the 9/11 attacks. It seemed to be going to the Persian Gulf region, and I said, what's going on here? Saddam Hussein didn't bring down the Twin Towers. So the little light went on, and I began to sort of disenchant myself from the normal groupthink that tends to take over in any organization.
Groupthink. At some point in your essay, you talk about how groupthink drives the deep state.
It absolutely does, just as it tends to drive any bureaucratic organization.
What do you mean by groupthink?
Well, the psychologist Irving Janis called it groupthink. It's a kind of assimilation of the views of your superiors and your peers. It's becoming a yes man. And in many respects, it's an unconscious thing.
I remember what Upton Sinclair once said, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
That is certainly a part of it.
You describe Washington as clearly and obviously the headquarters of the deep state, but talk about some of the others who are in the game.
Wall Street is perhaps the ultimate backstop to the whole operation because they generate so much money that they can provide second careers for a lot of the government operatives. They're going to make more money than they ever dreamed they would on Wall Street. And I think a good example of that is the most celebrated soldier of the last decade, David Petraeus. What did he do when he retired? He went to Colbert Kravis Roberts, a Wall Street buyout firm with $90 billion in assets under management.
You describe him as a kind of avatar of the deep state.
He is, in a way, because he now represents both ends of it. We see now our present-day Cincinnatus did not pick up the plow when he laid down the sword.
Cincinnatus was the Roman who left his farm to become a general in the war. When the war was over, he went back to be a farmer. That doesn't happen today.
No, it doesn't. The vast majority of generals seem to end up on the boards of defense contractors. We're having a situation where the deep state is essentially out of control. It's unconstrained. Since 9/11, we have built the equivalent of 3 Pentagons around the D.C. metropolitan area, holding defense contractors, intelligence contractors, and government civilians involved in the military-industrial complex. There are over 400,000 contractors, private citizens, who have top-secret security clearances.
And they are heart and soul of the deep state, as you describe it.
Absolutely.
They're being privatized, which means the power shifts from accountable officials to unaccountable contractors.
About 70% of the intelligence budget goes to contracts.
How new is this? I mean, back in 2010, the Washington Post published a stunning investigation of what the editors called Top Secret America. I mean, we have known about this, have we not?
Yes, we know about this, but the intelligence functions of the government are too important to outsource in the manner we have. It's something where absolute discretion is needed and absolute trust that they are not violating civil liberties.
All right, it's time for a pop quiz. How many of you are familiar with what are known as the 28 pages? And I'm talking with respect to the Joint Congressional investigation into the events of 9/11. Because of how the news media is bought and controlled by corporate powers that have replaced reporting the news with creating the news, they want you to hear the news the way they want to package it and limit it, is a better way to put it. The vast majority of you, because of that, have no clue, you've never heard of the 28 pages. The news media didn't want you to be familiar with it because they're controlled by corporations, all right? Instead of having the public interest at heart, they have a corporate agenda at heart, as we've been talking about. Well, thank goodness for cable access, right? Because otherwise, you wouldn't learn about them tonight. You wouldn't learn about these things. The 28 pages are some of the most important news you'll ever learn about. It doesn't get more important or more newsworthy than this topic. Question for you. Why did we have not just one, but two official investigations into the events of 9/11? Obviously to learn about who was behind the terrorist attacks, who financed it, who enabled those 19 hijackers, right? Well, the 28 pages were an entire chapter that was redacted and withheld from you, the American people, in the final report of the first investigation conducted by the Joint Congressional Committees led by well-respected Senators Bob Graham and U.S. Representative Porter Goss. The 28 pages was withheld from you by none other than George W. Bush and his point man at the FBI. I hope you're sitting down, because this shocked me when I learned it. Bob Mueller. Bob Mueller was the point man director at the FBI who followed, like a dutiful soldier, George Bush's directive to keep the 28 pages from your knowledge for 15 years until Barack Obama finally declassified the 28 pages just before he left office, I think about a year before he left. George Bush was known to be very close friends with Saudi ambassador to the U.S., Prince Bandar. He was the Saudi ambassador to the United States, and he was of the Saudi royal family. Those 28 pages have everything to do with revealing to the American people the answer we so needed regarding who financed 9/11. They contain powerful evidence that implicated Prince Bandar, several other Saudi officials connected to the Saudi government and the Saudi royal family, and President Bush, assisted by FBI Director Bob Mueller, ordered that evidence uncovered by the Joint Congressional Committee to be withheld from the American people. And like I said, they were finally made public, thank goodness, by President Obama 15 years later. So much lost time. But you had no idea because the mainstream media didn't want you to have any idea about it. And yet, this is, like I said, some of the most important news the American people need to heal after 9/11. And if only now learning about this makes you angry, good. Because that means there's hope for America. If it doesn't make you angry and you shrug your shoulders, then you're a sheep, okay? So from now on, when you answer your phone, your cell phone, you need to answer it. That needs to be your ringtone too. Now, Senator Bob Graham is one of the most ethical and trusted individuals who served our country in our lifetimes. I grew up in Florida before moving out here to California in 2002, and I remember when Senator Graham was the very well-respected governor before he was senator of Florida for 2 terms, after which he then went on to serve 18 years as a senator. As I said earlier, he was co-chairman of the Joint Congressional Inquiry into 9/11. Listen now to what he has to say in the following clips.
Virtually all of the agencies of the federal government were moving in the same direction, from a customs agent at an airport in Orlando who was chastised when he denied entry in the United States to a Saudi, to the President of the United States authorizing large numbers of Saudis to leave the country, possibly denying us forever important insights and information on what happened. You don't have everybody moving in the same direction without there being a head coach somewhere who is giving them instructions as to where he wants them to move.
So that includes before and after the events?
Primarily before the event. After the event, it shifts from being an action that supports the activities of the Saudis to actions that cover up the results of that permission given to the Saudis to act.
I no longer use the words cover up to describe what's going on. I find more accurately the words aggressive deception. The federal government has attempted to rewrite the narrative of 9/11 in order to exclude the role of the Saudis from that horrific story. And why did they do it? I think there are a number of reasons. Some of them relate to the long-time special personal relationship between the Bush family and the Saudi kingdom. It goes back 3 generations to Herbert Walker Bush's father, Prescott Bush, from a senator from Connecticut.
Okay, now, check out this next clip of Senator Graham speaking to the National Press Club, explaining how there are still other redacted, withheld investigative reports into the 16 other hijackers that were also completely withheld and redacted, still to this day, as we've now entered 2020.
Most of the information in the 28 pages was derived from 3 of the 19 hijackers, the 3 who lived in San Diego. The other 16 hijackers lived across the country, primarily in places like Florida, Virginia, New Jersey. There were investigations conducted in each of those and other places, which have also been classified and withheld.
Lastly, tonight, I want you to hear from FBI whistleblower attorney Colleen Rowley, because again, the mainstream media never really wanted you to be informed about her powerful testimony and her whistleblowing. Ms. Rowley reveals all the prior knowledge that the FBI had of pending possible terrorist attacks with jetliners before 9/11, and how Director Bob Mueller, again, ran interference and repeatedly refused to allow field agents, especially from her office in Minneapolis, to get the FISA search warrants they were begging for until it was too late. Let's go ahead and roll that clip.
If you remember after 9/11, Condi Rice said, well, there's a movie out right now called 9/11 Press for Truth. Has anyone seen it? Anyone? It's actually a pretty good movie. It's a little documentary. It's called 9/11 Press for Truth, and they have all that old footage of Condi Rice saying, well, I don't think anyone would have known that someone would hijack a plane and fly it into a building. Guess what? All kinds of people knew. There had been prior plots. I mean, you start looking at this. Actually, Condi Rice herself had been involved in protection for the G8. They had even exercises along these lines. There had been anyways, there was all, that was one thing. Our FBI director said something for about 3 weeks. He said, well, no one could have prevented 9/11. If we had had any idea, maybe we could have prevented 9/11. If we'd had any inkling of this. And of course, he was actually called on the day of 9/11 about the Moussaoui case. The agents in Minnesota were so worried that the case itself would be covered up. In order to prevent this embarrassment that, that there was a terrorist connection already known, and there are things about this terrorist connection. For instance, our acting supervisor August 23rd, 24th, in arguing with headquarters to go for this warrant, and the guy was saying, no, we can't do it. Our acting supervisor had said, this is a guy who could fly into the World Trade Center. And that was said in August 2001. Can you imagine how embarrassing this is? And of course, Mueller knows it. He knows that was even said very quickly.
Let me return to the memo here briefly. You say here in point 8, in the day or two following September 11th, you, Director Mueller, made the statement to the effect that if the FBI had only had any advance warning of the attacks, this is what you talked about before, we, meaning the FBI, may have been able to take some action to prevent the tragedy. Fearing that this statement could easily come back to haunt the FBI upon revelation of the information that had developed pre-September 11th about Moussaoui, I and others in the Minneapolis office immediately sought to reach your office through an assortment of higher-level contacts in order to quickly make you aware of the background of the Moussaoui investigation and to forewarn you so that your public statements could be accordingly modified. When such statements from you and other FBI officials continued, we thought that somehow you had not received the message, and we made further efforts. Finally, we faced the sad realization that the remarks indicated someone, possibly with your approval, had decided to circle the wagons at headquarters in an apparent effort to protect the FBI from embarrassment and the relevant FBI officials from scrutiny.
Now, and of course, so for 3 weeks, he's saying, well, if we had known, we may have been able to prevent it. I tried to call the director, and this is after 9/11, to get him to stop saying that, because I said, oh my gosh, when this comes out. And I knew there had been emails flying between our office and headquarters. I didn't know there were 70 emails. When our agent testified recently in the Moussaoui case, it comes out there's 60, 70 emails. He was almost caught, again, with this lying thing. He was very close to being caught in outright not telling Congress the truth because he was going with what he thought he had to say.
And don't forget, Mueller was assigned to this Trump investigation with his connections in Russia and documented so many of the collusions between Trump and Putin and then refused to act on it. So you start following that thread, and it just, some light bulbs really start to go on, making you realize that there's something wrong, that something smells really corrupt. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode tonight, but this is a to be continued on future episodes for sure, okay? And also, don't forget to check out my original 1 hour special on this topic way back in 2006. I was one of the early people who was talking a lot about the fact that the story we were told about 9/11, the narrative we were being given was wrong, was a lie, and was corrupt. So just go on YouTube and search Connie Bryan and Eric Huffschmidt, and you'll find that. I hope you'll check that out. All right, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.